Today, we are going to be discussing Greg Cromwell's famous novel, 1865. And in this novel, it's about a future dystopic world where the world is taken over by three main entities: Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia. And within these global superpowers, it kind of, the narrative goes that, at one week they're at war with this nation, the next week it's this nation, right? The entire population are under control by basically an invisible yet all-encompassing authoritarian regime where everything is the party, everything is the state, everything is the corporation. It's owned by INSOC. There's one corporation, there's one state. It is the totalitarian tendency taken out to its furthest extreme, played out over time, is predicated on the irresponsibility, laziness, and cowardice of general human nature, as predated on by a certain group of psychopaths who organize society to be this way, right? Where, everything is designed. Basically, it doesn't matter, because the idea that the revolution won't be televised, that even in that world, that only exists as a lure to pull out the dissidents. It only exists. There is no such thing as a revolution. It's left there as a lure for anyone who might be interested, because Big Brother's power, right, having a perpetual enemy both within and without, helps fuel a state of perpetual war that is broadcast in media 24/7, because everyone has TVs and loudspeakers and cameras in their phones, right? So in the world of 1865, it is a very, there's no privacy. There's no private language. There's no private thoughts. If you go against any of the corporate state narrative, basically you're just seen as a criminal. Things that once existed as notions of right, like the notion of rights, are just long gone. The notion of ownership is long gone. The anything personal, again, it has been completely absorbed into what is now human reality, and it's an ever-present war, and it's an ever-present problem, you could say, insofar as it requires the people to run a marathon with their physiology, right, just to survive. Now, the book gets into the psychology of the people living there, from the interrogators and the thought police to the individuals who are stuck therein. But the novel's main protagonist, Winston Smith, he works for the records department, and their job is to put information down the memory hole, to rewrite the narratives, right? To constantly rewrite history, to constantly change things, to constantly to make proof, to get rid of proof, whatever is needed in the moment. It doesn't even matter, actually, right? It doesn't matter what they're doing, so long as they're doing it. It might as well be like a purgatory of busy work, especially in a world where there is no joy. And a big part of the novel is that Winston Smith meets another person like him, and he meets Julia. And Julia is also aware of the totalitarian control, but still has a notion of her own self, her own private self that exists alongside or apart from Big Brother. And a lot of what she tells Winston, when they meet in private, which is illegal, right? Because privacy is illegal. Having private thoughts and private feelings and private meetings as private people just doesn't exist in this world, except where Big Brother doesn't really have a presence, and that's in the mind of the people who kind of exist at the outskirts of the state, which is just, in this world, it's the proles, it's the working poor. They don't have a mind for any of it. They're not a problem. They never have been to those in power, and they never will be, right? And especially when they already leverage total control. So as Winston meets with Julia, their own meeting is a connection that fuels their own chemistry. It's been said by psychologists and mystics and people through the ages, this kind of like, there's this idea that like people affect each other. So when two people meet, they're creating something beyond themselves, not just in the potential of a child and the future, but in this is getting to the point, like in a world where there is no future, the whole act of procreation, the idea of love, all of that is obsolete, all of that's gone, which Julia tells Winston, right? Something along the lines of like, all of this is predicated on sex going sour. And George Orwell said it himself, quoting him before he died in, I think it was 1948, was that before he died, he said the orgasm will be abolished, right? And I think a lot of people don't necessarily know what that means, but it's in the expression of what Julia says, that it required sex to go sour for everyone to increasingly sell out man, right? Because who's held responsible? Who's blamed? Who's the enemy? Men are the biggest danger, right? Obviously, all the violence, good and bad, all the violence in the world, good or bad. Who's been hired for all of history to do it? Who does it? Who primarily does it? Women are violent too, but their violence is generally a little bit more sublimated, subversive, right? It's this is its own department of literary analysis, but overtly, right? The armies of the world, it's always been the men. To this day, it's the men. The armies that'll be marching tomorrow and the next day and the next day, for every day, going on for in Big Brother's rule here, it's like it's always the same, right? So no one can believe in man, no one trusts man, no one, this is to completely rob the individual man of any dignity, any sovereignty, any notion of self, is to depotentiate him, is to weaken him, is to go increasingly backwards to a state of helplessness, right? Where all responsibility is deferred to Big Brother. And who's Big Brother? Well, Big Brother doesn't even need to exist. All that people need to believe is that, and know, is that he does exist because the consequences are real. The whole premise here is that Winston wants to do something about it, but he doesn't know what, because he works, like he has the proof himself, working in the records department, right? He has the proof of the party's corruption, of the daily nonstop corruption. Yet his own job is to burn it, and he doesn't really know what to do. And he's mistaken, and as he learns, the hope isn't in the proles, right? The revolution will not be televised. Again, everyone, it's like, I read it just yesterday, Young says it, right? Slavery and its revolution only exist in context of the state. So Big Brother owns it all. Hey, you want to get it on the revolution, TM? You want to go protest so you can be seen on TV, for situations that you have nothing to do with in a certain sense, or that you are far removed from, and you are just being irresponsible by concerning yourself with what's going on halfway across the globe and ignoring what's going on right behind your back, right in front of your face. It really is insanity. But I hope you understand again why, when there's no faith in man, when there is no meaning, when time has stopped, that these are the natural consequences, is that people lose their mind, their physiology, formerly being social animals who related to one another, who are now infinitely isolated, cut off, and made to not trust their own senses and their own thinking and their own feeling, right? And it's so pervasive in our culture. The most inane ideas have been presented, like, oh, there's no such thing as feelings, there's only facts. Like, this is the road to state slavery, right? The idea that the individual affect doesn't matter, the individual subjective experience doesn't matter, because that's a unique experience from an individual's dreams to their expression of themselves in their daily life. That's a fully unique and individual phenomenon, and that, guarantee you, is that person feels personally about that, because there's not much other way for a person to feel except where they give themselves to group affect. So if it's a circle, there's a question of what are the people doing within the circle, within the inner circle and the outer circle. What are the people really up to? So Winston, he has this proof. He wants to do something about it, doesn't know what. So one day after, I think him and Julia are having sex, and they're kind of talking about it after the fact, and it's the novel goes on. He tried to make her understand this was an exceptional case. It wasn't just a question of somebody being killed. Do you realize that the past, starting from yesterday, has been actually abolished? If it survives anywhere, it's in a few solid objects with no words attached to them, like the lump of glass there. And what that lump of glass was, real quick, let me interject, it's a paperweight. And the idea that in this world of pragmatic utilitarian value where everything's dictated and constructed and has no value, something like a paperweight or a work of art is now invisible to the human eye, like craftsmanship. The kind of feelings it can evoke has been that these things have been further alienated, like the people have been further alienated from what used to be the work of their own hands, the creation of art and objects, and having a primal connection to the world that wasn't manufactured through a televised broadcast as a means of mind control. If I was going to title the video real quick, I wanted it to be what's the spookiest and also simultaneously funniest part of 1984. What's his name? Greg Morwell, my bad. Greg Morwell here. He wrote, survives anywhere, it's in that lump of glass right there, right? It's in the object. The proof exists around us. We can look at the natural world, what humans were doing thousands of years ago, and see that people once existed free of such influences. Yet, how is it that everyone is now wired in? Well, that's the name of the game. And this is where it gets really, this is the spookiest part. Already we know almost literally nothing about the revolution and the years before the revolution, right? He's literally just saying that past event, whatever that event horizon of the present human reality in its totality of, hey, things were formerly different and now all we know is that things are changed, right? So every record has been destroyed or falsified. Every book has been rewritten. Every picture has been repainted. Every statue and street and building has been renamed. Every date has been altered. And that process is continuing day by day and minute by minute. History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right. I know, of course, that the past is falsified, but it would never be possible for me to prove it, even when I did the falsification myself. After the thing is done, no evidence remains. The only evidence is inside my own mind, and I don't know with any certainty that any other human being shares my memories. Just in that one instance, in my whole life, I did possess actual concrete evidence after the event, years after it, right? So this is Winston telling Julia that he has the proof. And Julia goes, and what good was that? Right? She's a practical woman, like most every good woman. It was no good because I threw it away a few minutes later, right? And that's why it's easy for Big Brother to co-opt her. That's why it's easy for Big Brother to enslave her, especially once sex goes sour. It was no good because I threw it away a few minutes later. Right? He had to throw it down the memory hole. But if the same thing happened today, I should keep it. It helps when your nonstop culture of warfare becomes a level of steam in which the motion just to survive creates a blurred effect that now no one can really, what's there to even look for? What's there to look forward to? What's there to care about? I'm quite ready to take risks, but only for something worthwhile, not for bits of old newspaper. What would you have done with it even if you had kept it? Winston goes on. Not much, perhaps, but it was evidence. It might have been planted a few doubts here and there. Suppose that I dared to show it to anybody. I don't imagine that we can alter anything in our own lifetime, right? And even this, like this is the learned helplessness. This is exactly it, right? You can't even believe in today. You have to believe in a tomorrow or a hereafter. Or in Big Brother's case, the only thing that's real is now. And what's real now is that we're at war with Eurasia. Tomorrow it's going to be East Asia. Now we're getting to the hilarious part. Michael Cromwell, in his book 1762, does have a sense of humor, right, to help make this process go down faster, or not faster, but with a little bit of sugar, you could say. And this is one of the most disheartening things in the entire novel. And it gets into the nature of their world, right? And that's that, she works for, I didn't mention this earlier, but Julia works for the Anti-Sex League, right? And this is to promote abstinence, because, there's no reason for people to love each other or be together anyway. That's already been invaded by the state. There's nothing that exists outside the state, and the family was one of the original casualties, which we'll also get into. But the difference in them is that Winston is the one who's thinking ahead. He's thinking of other people beyond just himself too. He's thinking about the future and future generations. And then he goes, gradually leaving a few records behind so that the next generations can carry on where we left off, right? They can be better off, that they could maybe escape the horror of it, that they would have a chance, right? Anything at all. And this is what Julia says. Julia, right? Supposedly, everyone has a stereotype, even they want to believe it, at least, right? That women are the nurturing ones and women are the motherly ones. But in this story, she goes, I'm not interested in the next generation, dear. I'm interested in us, right? And this goes back to Aristotle, right? Why do women and slaves, promote tyranny? Because under it, they have a good time. They're the ones who benefit, right? They get the special favors because they can garner them with favors. Anyway, this is what I said about selling out man, to constantly move backwards, to constantly grow weaker, smaller, to have less of a voice, less of a purpose, less of a meaning of the earth. So, and this is the funny part, Winston says to Julia, right? She goes, I'm not interested in the future, don't care about the next generations. I'm interested in us. He goes, you're only a rebel from the waist downwards, he told her, right? And she thought this brilliantly witty and flung her arms around him in delight, right? Fucking hilarious. In the ramification, and this reminds me of this is where the horrors of Brave New World meet 1984 to my mind, because again, the childlike nature of the people, despite their horrifying reality, and again, you see that it's not their fault because that's what they were born into, that's what they were conditioned since day one. It's beyond. An individual does not stand a chance against a whole, with millions and billions of people, and an entire corporation state to back it, and Big Brother and his invisible omnipresence, right? There's just no way an individual ever stood a chance, right? And that demoralization is part of the constant warfare. So, in the ramifications of party doctrine, she had not the faintest interest. This is exposition, right? This is kind of Winston's thoughts, you can see. Whenever he began to talk of the principles of INCSOC, right, the one corporation state, doublethink, the mutability of the past, and the denial of objective reality, and to use newspeak words, she became bored and confused, and then said that she never paid any attention to that kind of thing. One knew that it was all rubbish, so why let oneself be worried by it? She knew when to cheer and when to boo, and what was all needed. If he persisted in talking of such subjects, she had a disconcerting habit of falling asleep. She was one of those people who can go to sleep at any hour and in any position. Talking to her, he realized how easy it was to present an appearance of orthodoxy, um, while having no grasp of whatever that orthodoxy meant. In a way, the worldview of the party imposed itself most successfully on people incapable of understanding it. They could be made to accept the most flagrant violations of reality because they never fully grasped the enormity of what was demanded of them and were not sufficiently interested in public events to notice what was happening. By lack of understanding, they remained sane. They simply swallowed everything, and what they swallowed did them no harm because it left no residue behind, just as a grain of corn will pass undigested through the body of a bird. Quack, quack. Parrot says what? Anyway, pretty dark, pretty dismal, I know. We have here Stephen Sortwell's 1226. And in it, a protagonist, Juliet Smythe, meets Quentin Morgenstein. And together, they go to fight Big Sister. I haven't fully read the graphic novel yet. I don't know where it diverges from the story. I read the novel when I was first 14, and it really opened up my eyes to a lot of things. And what really stuck in my brain, the thing that really just stood there and waited there until my own eyes could then see what that looked like in reality, was when O'Brien said to Winston in room 101, we make the brain perfect before we blow it out, right? The previous tyrants, their rules were different, right? Thou shalt, thou shalt not, all these kinds of things. Ours is different. Thou art. You are the clay upon which we will etch our image. You will be another voice for Big Sister. In taking a look here, something did catch my eye. And it's a story about Winston's childhood, and that basically in this world, people just come and go. People disappear. One day they're there, the next day they're gone. I don't know if this rings a bell. Maybe it does for Americans, especially those who grew up without parents or parents who are in and out of institutions. And I mean that whether they worked at the institutions, whether they're the ones prescribing the medication or the ones taking the medication. How about that for spookiness, right? Whether they're the one, whether they're the prison guards or whether they're the ones in prison, that the people in the society, there's there one minute, gone the next, right? So basically, there's this touching moment where there's a chocolate ration given, right? So Winston's mother breaks off a small piece for his baby sister, and gives Winston the larger portion, and then Winston steals it away and runs away. And then, he had the notion that she was dying, that the baby was dying. And later, by the time he gets back, they're gone. And that's just, he was already mostly an orphan anyway. And like anyone else here, he just winds up a ward of the institution, a ward of the state. He learns, like they just said in the previous excerpt we read, right? It's real simple when you learn what to say, when to say it, how to say it, right? Because what's your alternative? Your alternative is torture. Your alternative is ostracization. Your alternative is having your life ruined and your livelihood taken away. It's just being stripped of humanity because you never had any to begin with, and that's the message, right? That none of which, like no one belongs to themselves. There's nothing private in this world. There's no privacy. There's no sense of personal feelings. I'm getting back to this, right? You're not allowed to have personal feelings. They're not even real. The only thing that's real is a perpetual state of warfare in which the party is always right, right? It doesn't matter if they have to lie, cheat, steal, murder. That's the name of the game, right? And this is their morality. This is the morality of the good and the just in this world, right? This is just their society. They're not doing anything wrong. In fact, they're all doing everything by the books. And you see how these books have been orchestrated, let's say, how they've been written and rewritten as we continue to read Gregory Ashwell's 1729. I mentioned that thing about the part of the story about Winston running away, and he's reflecting, and there's pictures of you can see, right? Look, she's holding the baby's dying. That's his sister. He stole from his sister and then bailed, right? These are all American dreams too. These are all American things too. These are kind of things that people here know. So he's reflecting on his mom, and he says, he did not suppose from what he could remember of her that she had been an unusual woman, still less an intelligent one, and that she had possessed a kind of nobility, a kind of purity, simply because the standards that she obeyed were private ones. It would not have occurred to her that an action which is ineffectual thereby becomes meaningless. If you loved someone, you loved him, and when you had nothing else to give, you still gave him love. When the last of the chocolate was gone, his mother had clasped the child in her arms. It was no use. It did not avert the child's death or her own, but it seemed natural for her to do it. The terrible thing that the party had done was to persuade you that mere impulses, mere feelings were of no account. And yet to the people of only 2 generations ago, what mattered were individual relationships, and a gesture, an embrace, a tear, a word could have had value in itself. And this is where Winston mistakes the proles are wrong, because who stands the least chance, right? And they're also removed from it, and they don't even know. The people inside don't know. The people outside definitely don't know. So the proles, it suddenly occurred to him, had remained in this condition. They were not loyal to a party or a country or an idea. They were loyal to one another. The proles had stayed human when they had not become hardened inside. They had held on to the primitive emotions which he himself had to relearn by conscious effort. The proles are human beings. We are not human. He's talking to Julia. She's laying in bed, right? Do you realize how utterly alone we shall be? When once they get a hold of us, there will be nothing, literally nothing, that either of us can do for the other. If I confess, they'll shoot you, and if I refuse to confess, they'll shoot you just the same. Nothing that I can do or say or stop myself from saying will put off your death for as much as 5 minutes. The one thing that matters is that we shouldn't betray one another. And Julia says, right, she's always on the surface, just always never looking any deeper, right? This is exactly how the party got women. If you mean confessing, we shall, right, it's just survival in the moment. This is what I mean when I say she's practical. It's a good womanly instinct, but, right, it's been survival for them, but, right, enough. Everybody always confesses. You can't help it. They torture you. I don't mean confessing. Confession is not betrayal. What you say or do doesn't matter, right? In a world of actors, in a world of fakes, right? And it's funny to me. Everyone wants to be So many people here want to be actors. Our social media people are actors. Spectators are actors. Everyone wants to be an actor, right? And Winston's pointing out, what does that mean? I don't mean confessing. Confession is not betrayal. What you say or do doesn't matter. Only feelings matter. If they could make me stop loving you, that would be the real betrayal. They can't do that. It's one thing they can't do. They can make you say anything, but they can't make you believe it. They can't get inside you. Winston learns that he's wrong here. No, that's quite true. They can't get inside you. If you can feel that staying human is worthwhile, even when it can't have any result, whatever, you've beaten them. Thanks.